Well, we certainly have a packed house for today's discussion. I think it's incredibly obvious that this topic has relevance for business owners. I guess as you consider the incredibly murky pathway out of what we've all been living through, I guess, which is now what, the better part of 11 weeks. So here to help us navigate the legalities of operating your business post-lockdown, we have the very capable and always colourful Katherine Hawes of Digital Age Lawyers. Good morning, Katherine.
Hello. Okay, I might just share my screen, which is, yeah. Now, of course, you know, as per normal, whenever I start this, you know, I always love this cartoon because inevitably I'll be on mute or something else will be occurring and we'll have to say, you know, joined by a, you know, can you hear us? So I always love this cartoon about Zoom meetings, just like a modern day seance. So the first thing, you know, I would like to say is that this is, you know, not legal advice. A lot of this, you know, that I'm going to talk about, I'm going to get you to go back to the basics of things that I always talk about, which to every business owner, I always say you need to remember two key words. One is, are you controlling your business? And the other is, are you protecting your business? And what I find COVID has done to a lot of business owners is a lot of our decision making has been taken away from us. And I really do think, you know, that idea of controlling your business as, you know, you reopen or, you know, whatever it looks like in November for all of us, I think it's really important that it is still you in the driving train. A lot of our decisions have been taken away, but there's lots of decisions that you still need to make and consider in order to control and protect your business. So it sort of has been a bit of a big dipper ride. We sort of had last year where we came out of COVID and, you know, for all intensive purposes, yes, there was rules, but there was nothing quite like the reopening that will occur later this year and into early next year. And it's not just that period of reopening. Coming out this time, the world has changed. There are now going to be decisions as a business owner you will need to make and consider that you haven't faced before. There will be some in some industries that you have faced before, and we just need to rethink how we now tackle some of these. So what we've put together is to sort of get us out, and I hate rides. One of the things my father took me on when I was 4 was a Big Dipper, and it was absolutely shocking, and I never went on one after it. So exactly the same, I don't want the same experiences with business coming out of lockdown, that experience of me going on the Big Dipper. So what we're looking at is a number of things, you know, how you open, how you review, and how you excel. Okay. It really is important that you consider, and that's why we've called it all. Open, recover, excel. Because if you consider those things, then you will be in a really good position going forward. So look, I am going to cover off, you know, topics such as business structure, contracts and agreements, intellectual property, and then I'm also going to cover the bumps in the road. You know, some of the things around employment, consumer, intellectual property that you may not have considered, or that you may have considered it a while ago, but COVID has brought it to a forefront that these things really need to be looked at, and maybe through a different lens this time. So throughout this, I'm going to ask, sorry, Stacey.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because we've got so many people on the call from varying industries, they'll no doubt have a myriad of questions. If people want to pop it in the chat box. So, Yep.
So what I'd like to do, because there is an awful lot, and look, there are very different things for different industries, and some, you know, there are some common themes, don't get me wrong. But what I'd like to do is two things. First off, if you do have a question, pop it in the chat. Normally I do stop along my presentations for questions, but given the size of the group and the forum that we're sort of stuck with, it just would get unwieldy. So if you pop it in the chat, what we'll do is at the end of the presentation, we'll pick out a few to answer, because I'm sure there'll be some common themes. But also at the end of the presentation, what I'll do is I'll download the questions from the chat, and I'll do a newsletter that will hopefully address a lot of those questions. If there are specific questions, we will also be, offering a legal strategy session, so you can come and chat to us. And the other thing we'll also be providing is a workbook to everybody here. So a lot of this material will also be written for you. Plus, there's a recording of this that I think will be popped up onto the Chamber website, so you can come back and see all my mistakes. No, just joking. All the housework that hasn't been done behind me. So there is, a fair bit of material to get through. And look, I know for a lot of us, we've been stuck at home, and, our decision making hasn't been, or our headspace hasn't always been there. But I really, businesses can come out of this. It won't be easy. I'm in the same boat as everybody else. So, okay, so yes, I am in the same boat as everybody else, because I run small businesses just like all of you. So the things that you are grappling with, whether I'm a service base, I have an office, I have staff, I have clients, and I am faced with the same decision making and the same problems, that small businesses face. So we're not a large firm, there's 7 of us. Through COVID, we've had to stand people down. So we're down to, I think 3 of us who haven't lost any hours, and the rest have all had to lose hours. So, when I talk about these issues, these are also issues in my own business that I've had to grapple with. So what because even, in my own business, it's about how we open, how we review, and how we excel. So this is really about reviewing today, and looking at what are the things between now and a date in either late October. For some of us, it will probably even be a bit longer, into offices, but it is about now what you review in order so that you can be prepared and excel when things open. So one of the first things I'm going to ask people to look at and review is their business structure. Now, I bat on a lot about business structures, because, a lot of us have taken on either debt, we've signed documents, we've taken on, government subsidies. Now we need to know whether or not we're personally liable. Are we equally liable in a partnership? If we've got a company, what does that mean? So has the company taken on debt? Are you sure you're going to be able to service that debt even when we open up? So a sole proprietor is basically somebody who works for themselves. You can still have employees, but generally a sole proprietor, all the profit goes to you as an individual, and all the liability goes to you as an individual. So if you have taken on a lease, if you have signed contracts, then you are personally liable for all of that. Similarly with a partnership, you're equally liable for the debts in the partnership. Now, with corporations, one of the key things about having a company was something called the corporate veil. And that is, as a director, you would not be necessarily liable for the debts. You do have director's duties, one of the key duties is that you are not to trade insolvent. So what's happened over COVID is that a lot of businesses have borrowed money going forward. There are a lot of businesses with very large tax debts because they haven't been able to pay either the GST or the tax for the wages. Now, last year, what happened was the government brought in something called safe harbour for directors. So what it was to allow you to take on debt to get your business to continue, and it afforded you protection from a very specific clause in the Corporations Act about insolvent trading. Now, those temporary changes are no longer in force. They finished in December last year. So it is really important that if you are taking on debt as a director of the company, you'll only be afforded the safe harbour for the period that it was granted last year. If it is in relation to this lockdown, there are not the same provisions. Okay, so it's really important to understand that a lot of the things that were brought in last year, such as safe harbour, JobKeeper, deferred payments, all of that have not been afforded this time round. So you need to look at your risk. You need to work with your accountant very, very carefully to ensure that if there is any, insolvent trading, or you can't open because of lack of funds, that you look at restructuring. I've spoken to a lot of insolvency practitioners. The tax office is very interested in assisting with restructuring, so that their view is that they paid a lot of money to keep people employed. They don't really want to see a whole heap of businesses now go to the wall because of debts. So what I would strongly suggest is that you take this opportunity to really look at your balance sheet, your profit and loss, have a look at where you might be paying for things that you don't necessarily need, and start to restructure some of that debt as well. Can't stress enough, do not be afraid of seeking help from professionals. Okay, there's a lot of talk about people seeking help, for mental health issues, but, please see an insolvency practitioner, your accountant, work with them. Okay, there is a lot of assistance that can be given, and there's a lot of structuring that can be done to ease the burden going forward. Okay, so please, don't feel embarrassed. This was nobody's fault. So going forward, please, if you feel like there's too much debt, go and see somebody. The other area that I would strongly suggest that you review is your contracts. Okay, it is a time to look at, are you in a supplier contract that doesn't suit you? What are your trading terms? What are your employment contracts? And if you don't have employment contracts, I strongly urge you, particularly going forward, that you have employment contracts. Few of the areas going forward for business that are probably going to be some of the minefields will be employment, what that looks like, and how we go forward. Also strongly suggest that you look at contingency plans in your business. So your estate planning, which is your will, your enduring guardianships, your powers of attorney. What happens if you do get sick and you cannot operate your business? What do you have in place? Again, I'd strongly suggest you talk to insurance brokers. There's a number in the chamber that are willing to help you find the right insurance to protect. What I'm talking about is who can sign documents on your behalf if you can't. There's also, have a look at your website terms and conditions. You know, if you post things, have you covered delays in postage? Have you covered insurance of post goods? So if you are in a partnership, now is the time to put that into writing. I'm currently doing a partnership dispute. There's no partnership agreement. One of them has become sick. How do we now exit this business? You know, what's the value? All of that at a time of stress. If it was in writing, if we had an agreement, then, you know, it would be a lot easier on the parties. If you have a company and you're not the single director shareholder, and I don't care if it's with your best friend, it's with your brother, it's with your wife, it's with your partner, you still need a shareholder agreement. Okay, families are also in crisis. So you don't need your business to be suffering as well. Get a shareholder agreement, get a partnership agreement. This is the time to get your business on the right footing so it can excel. And disputes that arise can be easily and quickly settled. And that is the greatest benefit of a contract, is the fact that you can easily, you know, point to clauses. You can, you know, have a discussion based upon a document that you've both agreed to. There is nothing worse than trying to remember, you know, what happened 5 years ago when this started, or 3 years ago. You know, at present, you're probably lucky if I remember what I spoke about this morning. I keep trying to put the dirty dishes in the fridge instead of in the dishwasher. So the benefit of all of this being written is that it lessens the dispute and it lessens the stress. So what you should include in your terms and conditions are, what are you providing? When will it be provided? On what terms are you providing it? So what happens if, you know, deliveries can't be made to unvaccinated people? Again, I'm not saying that's the case. Please don't take it that way. But we're not sure what the future will look like. What you need to look at with your terms and conditions is, do they cover the new environment in which we will be operating? Wheeling out your old ones is not going to work into the new environment. COVID is a new threat, it's a new risk, and it needs to be dealt with now in all of your legal documents. So what services can you provide? Who can you provide them to? On what grounds can you refuse? You know, the other one there, is, which will also be a really large area, will be privacy. You know, what information are you collecting? Who's liable for it? What happens if it escapes? Are people consenting to it? So you really need to start to look at also your privacy policy. Yeah, who has access to information around health records, names, addresses? Your terms and conditions need to now protect your business in really what will become the new norm. And these are the things that we will have to grapple with, and as business owners start to also decide. So also your terms and conditions need to include payment terms. I mean, there's more and more often, you know, where cryptocurrency may be used. You know, I was quite surprised. I actually, you know, had to write a check for the first time, I think, in a number of years the other day. Delivery times, you know, you're at the mercy of third parties. Make that clear in your terms and conditions. You also need to ensure that in your terms and conditions that you give people guarantees and warranties. So, you know, how long is a product meant to last for? Can't stress enough that return policies, I always love a good sign that says, you know, no refund or return. Yeah, there is. Okay. If a product is not as described, does not work, any of those issues. Now, given a lot of us have gone online, you know, if you are selling items online, please make sure the description is accurate. If you're putting measurements up, make sure the measurements are accurate, okay? So that you're not dealing with returns and customer complaints or even an allegation of misleading. I know a lot of businesses have had to go online, and I hate that word pivot, but exactly is what a lot of businesses have had to do. You need your website terms and conditions. You definitely need terms and conditions around supply of goods and services online. If you are recording sessions, you need approval. Okay, so just like, you know, today the Chamber's recording, you know, they'd have to seek approval, and which they did at the beginning because it's a Zoom meeting. But just remember, none of those laws have changed around recording. If you're doing a performance management over Zoom or over any other platform and you're recording it, you need the other person's approval. So just, you know, we've moved into a very digital world very quickly, and I would ask you to just consider, you know, the fact that you think you can do it doesn't necessarily mean that you can, nor does it necessarily mean the law has caught up. The law will take, I think, in some aspects, quite a while to catch up. Business will be making decisions on a number of issues way before this law. Now, for a lot of you, it may be that you just cannot fulfill your contract. What I would suggest in contracts that you are now agreeing to, or that you are signing, or that you are given to sign, that there is something in there, a clause in there called force majeure. Now, what force majeure means is the fact that if you are unable to fulfill your side of the bargain, which is what a contract is, so that is, you know, it is unforeseen circumstances, neither party contemplated, neither party thought could happen, then you may have a very legitimate reason for not continuing with the contract. So I would suggest in lots of contracts, and whether it be for a wedding event where you've had to change numbers, through to construction industry, that contracts contain that clause, and that clause now specifically include pandemic measures, public health orders, because a lot of the old clauses don't. So just because you're in a contract, you know, there may be a legitimate reason, you know, such as a public health order, that you can't fulfill that. Okay, so really important you understand that, you know, whilst breaching a contract is never good, the law does recognise in certain circumstances that you just cannot continue with it, and that you may need to break it. Also impossibility, so that could be, I know in the building industry at the moment, supplies, you just can't possibly fulfill it, or that the contract's been frustrated because of some event outside the control of the parties. So again, coming out of lockdown, start to look at your contracts, make sure that anything going forward has these clauses in it. As I said, we've all gone online. There is more and more scams around. Please ensure that your staff are aware of your policies around security measures, of obtaining data from people. Have a robust policy around privacy. When you're collecting information, how is it stored? So, for instance, if people aren't using a QR code reader, and look, there will be some people that just will not be able to. How do you collect that information? Where do you store it? Who has access to it? How long you have to store it for? Now, a lot of these are unanswered questions. What I'm suggesting is that you start to answer them in terms of protecting your business. So, for instance, if you have a sign-in book, my strong recommendation would not to have that at the front desk with everybody's name and phone number on it. Coming out of the past lockdown, there was a restaurant and it had 3 family law judges in it. The book was open on the desk and all of the information relating to those 3 judges, including their family, their private numbers and their home address, were left for the world to see. So I would suggest that you take precautions in relation to, where any of that information is kept, who has access to it, and that it is not divulged to the general public. These are going to be some of the things you're going to have to, in a sense, business will have to come up with. But it is also about the fact the last thing you would want is somebody's information to be divulged, maybe to an ex, a violent ex, whatever it might be, and it come from your place. I'd also suggest that you have, it's going to be hard transitioning employees back to the office. How many times a day they all, go onto Facebook, how they engage in social media, how you want your brand reputation to be acknowledged. So I definitely suggest if you do not have one going forward, you definitely need a social media policy within your business. The policy should cover also what they can comment on and what they can share. So instead of having their own Facebook page or Instagram page with corporate photos, that they only share them from the corporate page. So definitely going forward, we're all now more online than ever before, and it's more important that you protect your brand than ever before. So, open for business. Supposedly there's going to be some road bumps, and I'd suggest there's going to be quite a few road bumps. Some of the things that I think you really need to be aware of is public health orders. Okay. Now, at the moment, public health orders are being relied upon quite heavily by the government. The validity of some of those public health orders, the standing of them, how long they can be enforced for, and whether or not the Minister for Health actually has the power to make some of these health orders is still in dispute. There is currently a number of matters that have been filed in the Supreme Court challenging public health orders, particularly challenging the lockdown orders, in particular LGAs. So at the moment, there's a bit of a buffer for businesses because you can point to the public health orders, particularly one of the key things around vaccination. So the government has come out and said that they won't make vaccinations mandatory, but if you're not vaccinated, you won't have the same freedoms. Now, what that means is, yes, they won't say that you must, but as a business owner, you are then left monitoring a number of these issues. So, and you're monitoring them unless there is legislation, Now, I will also say this, there has been a number of bills put forward into Parliament. So Fred Niles has put through a bill saying that if employers make their employees get vaccinated and they have an effect, then they'll be liable for that. That has not passed, okay? This is the other key thing. There is a number of bills being put forward. It doesn't make it law until it's passed by Parliament, okay? So just at the moment, what we have is public health orders, and those are the things you need to have regard to. There will be a raft of legislative changes, directions, but I would not anticipate that coming either out until late this year or early next year. The other thing you need to be aware of is as I've just spoken about, privacy and data collection. So, how are you going to store information? What are you going to use? Definitely COVID safety plans. So every business has to have one. So in terms of your safety plan, are you up to date? Have you looked at the latest from Safe Work? Are you monitoring changes? I know we've all been in the days where we've had some, magical WHS plans. We've done our risk ratings. We've done all of that, and they've sat in a drawer. Coming out of this, it's not the environment where you'll be sitting in the drawer, okay? You really need to have it as a working and an active plan, and it needs to be monitored. So, for instance, at present, masks are worn in offices. It's not, oh, gee whiz, it's a bit annoying. That is what needs to occur. Probably, vaccinations and employment issues are going to be probably the two greatest things coming out. In relation to employment law, particularly for those who have offices and getting people back in them, at present, there is still the work at home, unless your job cannot be done at home. So obviously, if you stack a warehouse, you can't really do that at home. But in terms of getting employees back into the office, there is new legislation and new directions come out from Fair Work, where there needs to be flexible arrangements put in place. You also need to consider how employees are going to get to the office. Is there a risk? What happens if they get COVID? Who's liable? And also, how many people are you going to have in the office? You need to comply with the 4 square metre rule. I think will be the one as we come out, and then probably reduce to the 2. So employment law around vaccinations. So at present, I think the deadline was today that health workers be vaccinated. How I am explaining, and again, this to businesses, is it's part of your work health and safety. So it's very similar to, I had a matter ages ago where there was a challenge by Sikh community to wearing motorcycle helmets or bike helmets in New South Wales. The argument was that they'd have to remove the turban, cultural and religious reasons. They didn't, think it was appropriate. Now, in New South Wales, it is mandatory to wear a helmet if you are on a cycle or a bike, unless you apply for an exemption, which is a whole different area. But the point I'm making is that you need to do your WHS plan. COVID is now part of that. How are you managing the risk of COVID in your business? Now, if managing the risk of COVID in your business is that people have to be vaccinated, then that is how you're managing your work health and safety.
Speaking of which, Catherine, we have a question in the chat box about checking. It's basically Tommy is from RSO asking, without the QR code linked to the vaccination record, there's no way that we can check for authenticity of the vaccine passport. He's saying that they've already caught somebody who's forged the certificate.
Yep, I mean, it goes back to our old driver's license days. So the thing is, okay, so I suppose the thing is what I'd ask you, you are not and again, this is an opinion and not legal advice, but you need to remember that you are not the police, you are not the deriver of that certificate. It's a bit like if you, perceive that somebody is not over the age of 18 and you ask for their ID and it's a fake ID, you've asked the question, until there is a way of not forging them, then how far is business going to be responsible? And that's an unanswered question. Okay, what I would be suggesting is that you have processes, policies in place that you can show that this is what you did, and then could anybody have done it any better, would be the question. If there is no standardization, if it's not like a driver's license where it's harder or a passport where it's harder and harder to forge, then you can only do what you can do to the best you can do it at the time. Would be my response to that. Because the thing is that you need to consider: are you controlling your business? Are you protecting your business? Okay. Now, if you are of the view that it is not a legitimate certificate, similarly as if an employee comes with a fake medical certificate, then you take action. It is going to be uncharted territory until we have something like an ID system that links to everything, because business just isn't designed to do that. Does that answer it? No, everybody's gone quiet. Okay. The other thing that you also need to be very conscious of is that there are different public health orders in different states. I do have a client that works, in Victoria, and they do have different rules. It's very important that you do be aware, if you are across states, that it's not all unified. And look, the last point, there will be new legislation coming in. I can't imagine that there won't be. There's probably a raft of little beavers working away that will provide, hopefully, some guidance on a lot of these issues, rather than just falling back on our best practices, which is what I'd suggest people do at the moment.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions coming up about this in the chat box at the moment. Yeah. So yeah, I think this is obviously a running theme of pain for people to try and consider how this is going to be policed by each individual business owner for employees and also customers. Yep. So
look, and at present, I think at the moment you get a little piece of paper that says you've been vaccinated. The question really is as a business owner, are you following the public health order? So, and then in terms of how far you wish to then go further, I really do think that's, I think maybe I know people are asking, do we have the right to refuse service to a client who refuses to wear a mask if they don't report to have an exemption? Well, at present, the public health order will say, yes, you do. Okay. Now, the question will be what legislation will then come in, because public health orders are not legislation. Okay, public health orders are made, you know, through the minister. So the question will be, once those public health orders end, what will the legislation look like, which I can't envisage will not come into effect. Okay, so at the moment you do have the public health orders to rely upon, to say that masks must be worn, and you do not have to, you know, allow them entry without it. And actually, if you do, you'd actually be breaching the public health order yourself. So that, in terms of only the police can ask for their exemption, no, you're entitled. There's actually, if they are, well, some people who have exemptions actually wear a badge with the exemption or carry something to say the exemption. You know, so yes, you can ask for it. You know, so no, it is a public health order. Yes, the police are the only ones who can fine, arrest, do all of that. So please, nobody run around doing a citizen's arrest or any of that. But you are, you know, you are able to ask for it. Okay, if you are a business that is able to open it to double vaxxed at 70%, does this mean our staff must also be vaxxed? From my understanding of it, it would mean that, yes, the staff must also be vaxxed. So in terms of, and as I understand it, particularly in hospitality, and it will be similar to, you know, when we reopened it last year, hospitality and a few other areas had to, front of house had to continue to wear masks. Patrons didn't. So there will be, you know, rules around all of that. So, you know, the government is pushing that freedoms will only be afforded to those that are vaxxed. Now, if their job now, the conundrum becomes, if a person can work at home and not interact at all with staff or customers, can you mandate that they be vaxxed? Now, that might then be a more difficult question. So it is going to be, you know, a risk management. If they're at home, they don't see any clients, customers, you know, can an employee then make them vaccinated? Probably a lot harder argument to make.
A really interesting question just came in from Claire Angus.
Yep.
She's asking, if our industry isn't mandated to be vaccinated, and if we don't insist on our employees being vaxxed, then under the WHS, if there's a contract COVID, if they contract COVID at work, can that affect our workers' comp?
Okay, so there was a raft of changes made during the last year, where yes, it will affect your workers' comp. So and it's not just the person who's not vaxxed. What about if one of the employees who is vaccinated has an underlying health condition and contracts it? Are you going to be liable? Again, it would be, are you allowing, you know, a danger into the workplace without putting the risks and controls in place? So you know, I keep going back to those words of control and protect. So if it is a risk that either a client, customer, employee can contract COVID at the workplace, then you do need to put in measures to ensure, and the strongest measure is vaccination. So they will be covered by workers' comp, and during the last changes, it was deemed that they will have caught it at work. Not only that, you've also then got the deep cleaning, you know, the cost to an employer when COVID occurs in a workplace really can have long-term effects. So, you know, in terms of employment, there is going to be, and I just move forward. Okay, so the issues are going to be how long people can continue to work from home, what are the requirements going to look like, do you have to have flexible working arrangements? And then the big one is going to be regarding vaccination. Now, the other thing is that if it comes down to the fact that if you do not have at least one dose, or you do not have double doses, let's say by February next year, there are certain things you will not be able to do. And I mean social things, you know, nobody's even brought up whether or not, if you're not vaccinated, can you play sport? You know, can you go to the swimming pool? What will you or will you not be allowed to do? So from that point of view, I think as we get towards that opening date, it hopefully will become clearer. As I said, at present, you do have the public health orders. It will be once those public health orders aren't around, what the issue is going to look like. I mean, it also brings up issues around when you interview somebody for a job. Can you ask if they're vaccinated? You know, if it's essential for the job, then I don't see why you, just like you need to ask for a driver's license. So I know, you know, there's been a lot of hype around it, but I think if we bring it back to our basics as business owners, which is this essential for somebody to be in the workplace? So, for instance, with driving cars, I mean, obviously, if they're in a car service area, you need somebody who can move a car, and they have to have a driver's license, and they probably have to have a good driver's license. You know, if somebody's working with children, we ask for working with children's checks. Vaccination will fall into that category. Okay. Aged care, you've got to have a working check, and you've got to have a police check. Similar type of thing. So I think we need to rethink about how we look at it, and, you know, look at it in terms of what do you need in order to do this job, you know. And it's similarly in a lot of professions, you've got to have good character, you've got to have other, you know, checks done. So vaccination, I think, will become just one of those checks. I would suggest that everybody go to the work health and safety. There is a myriad of information on there. You know, Safe Work Australia has you know, tried and done a really good job. There's lots of click down, there's lots of businesses you can go to. There is, you know, different, you know, I am, and if my internet would work at home, this would be good. But I am a worker, I'm a small business, what industry you're in, what information you need. So what duties you have, cleaning, you know, how often, if you're in an office, do you have to clean now? What do you have to do to protect vulnerable workers? So if you know there's somebody who has an underlying health condition, masks, gloves, it has a myriad of resources that I would strongly recommend everybody who's a business owner going and looking at. I mean, I've got the same decisions moving staff back in to the city office in terms of how are they going to get there. You know, if what happens, you know, we don't have enough room within the office, so there'll have to be a rotation. But I sublease, so I need to ask the lessor exactly what you know, they're doing in terms of cleaning. We have a common kitchen, which don't even get me started what that's going to look like with a common fridge. You know, so I really, you know, these are things that, you know, we're just going to sort of have to keep in mind. How do we deal with other things? Is this any real different to how we deal with other things in the workplace? And then what do I need to implement in my workplace that ensures that I control and protect the business? Now, the last thing I sort of would want to go through, noting the time, is that you do review your current, this is a bit of a checklist. Look, you undertake a health check. We work with businesses all the time, making sure that you are compliant. So you can book in for that. We do have a chamber special that I'll get Stacey to send out. Review your agreements. Make sure we're clear on the employment. Check your insurance. It's again an industry that, just like law, is coming to grips with what pandemics and COVID looks like. And whether or not there is other insurance that you may need or to take. Have a look at debt restructuring. If you've taken on a lot, go and see somebody and have a chat to them. And in particular, check that your COVID policy is up to date. So this is the sort of the checklist that all businesses, you know, over the next few weeks, I would suggest, you know, you need to go through and really start to think about. And think about it, how you've dealt with other challenges. And, you know, it's not just, you know, from my point of view, I made decision to shut the office well before the government made decision that we were to work at home, because I could see what was happening. So I do think as business owners, it's also important that we start to protect our business as well, and put those measures into place. So I know there's lots of questions in the chat. There is a workbook that I'll send out. I'll also answer a lot of the questions in a newsletter that will go out with anybody. Otherwise, you know, you're happier, you know, please get in contact with us. Our blog on our website also has quite a bit of information. It has some of the information around the new flexible working arrangements as well. So look, I know that probably hasn't answered all questions. I don't think it's possible to answer all questions. I don't think even we probably know as business owners everything that we're going to face coming out of this. But what I would say is let's deal with what we can deal with and deal with it well. That's the end of the presentation. So Stacey, do we have time to look at a few questions?
Look, I think this last question from Claire, it's sort of, she's indicating she would like some clarity around timelines. Do you have any idea of sort of when the rules, we might have some clarity around the rules? I know that's really tricky.
Well, look, as I just said, I you know, what I'd suggest is that we look at what we currently have and work within what we have. Like there, you know, there is always in business going to be the what ifs. Yeah. And at the moment, we have public health orders in place. So you do have those that do need to be complied with, and there are consequences for not. You know, if we knew COVID was coming, we wouldn't be here. So it is going to be a catch up. Now, in terms of, I know, you know, there's all this talk about, there is no date that has been set. You know, yes, it may be the first, you know, there's also school holidays. You know, in terms of getting ready to open and knowing the rules, all I can suggest is think about how you deal with other risks in your business, and then apply that same logic here. Keep up to date with the public health orders, but remember that it is also about you protecting your business and the steps you need to take to do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't have a crystal ball, unfortunately, of when there will be magic legislation, but pending that, follow the rules as they are, is the best advice I can give.
Yeah, and just before we wrap it up, if you do have a specific question for your specific business, please just now pop it in the chat, because we will be following up with everybody after this. So Katherine will send some information through. So keep your eye on your inbox for all that.
Is everybody still awake? Yes, it's always hard when you come back from doing training and people are still there. Which is, I'm pleased to see.
So yeah, thank you so much for everybody that did jump on, and yeah, like I said, more soon. So, and thank you so much, Katherine, for your presentation today.
All right, I'll just, yeah, if you can pop your questions in and then we'll come back to them.
Yeah, great. All right, well, have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks so much.